Welcome back to the Lumiose Post, where we talk about all things Pokemon, and today we'll be talking about Fallers. Fallers are one of the coolest concepts in the entirety of the Pokemon franchise, in my opinion. These are people who, well, we'll get into this, but there's kind of two different definitions, a fan definition and an official definition. The official definition, though, is that this is someone who has gone through an Ultra Wormhole. We see many examples of these, and the effects that this can have on a person are kind of insane. We're going to break it all down, but first let's talk about the different Fallers we have. So some confirmed Fallers we have are Annabelle, and also an unnamed person from Looker and Nanu's past. They used to work with Looker and Nanu, but present day we've met Annabelle. There's also Mon, how would you pronounce his name? I've never learned that, but that is Gladion and Lily's father, Lucamine's husband, kind of. I guess they're legally still married, but, you know, he doesn't remember who she is, so yeah. And then there are more examples that the fans would consider Fallers, but actually the official definition would not. And so that's kind of the thing, is we have to kind of go, what is the definition of a Faller? Like I said, the Pokemon Company has like the official definition for it that is given in games is it's someone who's passed through an Ultra Wormhole. However, there are characters who we don't know that they've passed through an Ultra Wormhole, or in fact, maybe we even know that they did not, but they have a lot of symptoms that are very similar to a Faller. For example, in Legends Arceus, we meet some characters that are clearly displaced in their time. The protagonists of Legends Arceus are not supposed to be there. They're actually from the present day. It's heavily implied that they are the protagonists from Diamond and Pearl, just about like 5-ish years after the events of Diamond and Pearl. They get thrown back into the time of Hisui. And I don't want to hear anybody say that, oh no, they've got the Sword and Shield shirt and the Galar shirt, and the X and Y shirts, they're actually from Kalos, and no, they're not. You can have multiple t-shirts. Do you see this? I got this at a TJ Maxx. You can go to your local TJ Maxx and buy this. It's not exclusive to me. Anyone can buy it, as long as they have a TJ Maxx or whatever brand this is. It's not it's a t-shirt. It doesn't mean anything. The characters are clearly designed to be Lucas and Dawn, so shut up. Shut up. That's who they are. But anyways, these characters have been displaced through time, and also so has Ingo in Legends Arceus. However, we don't know that Ingo has, if he passed through an Ultra Wormhole or not. It's heavily implied that he came from one of the time-space distortions, and we know that we, the player character, were brought into the time of Hisui from Arceus, just kind of sending us back in time. So, the interesting thing about this is we have some similar symptoms to Fallers. A lot of Fallers tend to lose their memories, and at least some of their memories, and kind of have just a very hazy recollection of what their life was like. And we see this with our character. Our character doesn't really explain a lot about their past, so it's implied that maybe they don't remember everything, but we remember our names, and at one point in the game, you get the choice to either reference gym battles or contests, which implies that you at least remember an idea of what that was. And then Ingo, too, he's completely lost his memory, but does remember his name, has some vague things, like remembers that there's a guy who looked like him, which is obviously his twin brother. He remembers a Pokemon that could light his way through his cave, remembering his Chandelure, and he also, while he doesn't necessarily remember trains, he does a lot of the, like, all aboard talk, you know, train talk and train hand signals. It's stuff to imply that, like, while he doesn't remember, it's still kind of like a subconscious memory that still is left over. He still has those same mannerisms. But this is interesting because we see this with some other Fallers. Mon does not remember who he is. And then also Annabelle doesn't remember much about her previous life. It's implied that Annabelle remembers that her name is Annabelle, and that Mon remembers that his name is Mon, but that's really it. Also, interestingly enough, Annabelle uses a lot of the same Pokemon that she uses where you see her in Pokemon Emerald. So what's interesting about this is that implies that Annabelle possibly fell through the Ultra Wormhole with her Pokemon. Whereas we know Ingo did not do this, and the player character in Diamond and Pearl did not do this when they fell in Legends Arceus at the beginning. So that is just something interesting to note. But yeah, so I want to get that out of the way because that is weird. We have characters that are not going through Ultra Wormholes, so they're not technically fallers, but they have all the same symptoms as a faller. And then we as fans kind of reference that. Like with all this Pokemon Legends ZA discussion, I've seen a lot of people say, and myself included, I'm guilty of this too, saying, oh, I wonder who the faller will be this time. Will there be another faller this time? Implying that Ingo was a faller when technically speaking, he wasn't. He didn't go through an Ultra Wormhole. But I like this definition better. I think it would be any kind of time-space distortion, which an Ultra Wormhole would be an example of, that sends you to a time or place that is completely different, you know? Then another thing that's shaky about this is some people tend to lose their memories. Like we just said, the Diamond and Pearl protagonist, Ingo, Annabelle, they all lost their memories. But then there are plenty of characters who go through an Ultra Wormhole but do not lose their memories. The Ultra Recon Squad, while they came from another dimension into ours instead of our dimension into another, they went through an Ultra Wormhole, didn't have any memory loss. The player character, Lily, Lusamine, and Guzma, the player character of Sun and Moon, they all go through Ultra Wormholes at some point in the game, and none of them lose their memory. So that's also just kind of an interesting thing, too, that sometimes people lose their memory, sometimes don't. It's especially interesting that the people who willingly went through one did not lose their memory, but the people who did. That's really, really interesting to me. And we also have an example of a character who showed symptoms of being a faller, but we don't know that they were. And this is in Oris, we encounter Looker, who doesn't remember much and kind of just came out of the ocean. And given that these were right before Sun and Moon, a lot of people think that this was kind of an Easter egg, myself included, think that this was an Easter egg to Sun and Moon, introducing the concept of fallers. And Looker is a faller here. We don't know when he fell. You know, it could have been he fell at some point after the events of Sun and Moon or Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, as him and Annabelle are kind of researching Ultra Beasts and Ultra Wormholes. So maybe at some point he fell through one to the Oris time and timeline. So, yeah, we don't know if he fell or not. There's no proof of that. He could have developed amnesia another way, but did just want to throw that out there, that Looker has shown symptoms of being a faller, but we don't have any evidence that he definitely is. And for the record, we're going to be strictly talking about the mainline games here. So, you know, the anime obviously has some other concepts they're introducing with this. You know, Ash, Mallow, Kiawe, all the Alola gang has gone through an Ultra Wormhole. Also, interestingly enough, though, Professor Willow, who is the professor in Pokemon Go, has also gone through an Ultra Wormhole and doesn't seem to have any memory loss from it, but that did happen. I'm only mentioning that because Pokemon Go is kind of directly tied to the mainline games. While it's not a mainline game, it's directly tied to it in that it directly connects to Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, and also directly connects to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. You know, it's how you get Meltan in the mainline games. It's how you get Gimmighoul, its roaming form in the mainline game, so I did just want to throw that out there. Another little fact about these fallers is that Ultra Beasts, when they come to our dimension, seek out these fallers. And the reason why is because they can sense that residual energy from falling, that like ultra-dimensional energy. And so they're tracking it down, really just looking for a way home. They can sense it, and they assume that it is an Ultra Wormhole, which means that it's their ticket to get back to their homeworld, so they chase it down. This is actually how the International Police Force, Looker, tracks down these Ultra Beasts, is by using characters like his old partner with Nanu, and also using Annabelle and you, the player character in Sun and Moon, to track these Ultra Beasts, as they're all attracted to you since you have been through an Ultra Wormhole and are giving off that ultra-dimensional energy. I don't know if this would be the case, again, for the ones who didn't fall through an Ultra Wormhole. Ingo, the main characters from Diamond and Pearl. I don't know if they would give off this or not. We don't know because there are not Ultra Beasts in Legends Arceus. But that is interesting. Maybe that's even a concept that we could explore in, if not Legends EA, perhaps a future Alola Legends game, which would go so hard, by the way. Can we just talk about that for a moment? A Legends Alola game would go so hard. And back on the Looker thing, theorizing that Looker could be from this, there's also some other characters that I personally don't have a ton of evidence for them being a faller, but I kind of do wonder it. Like, one example is Volo. I've actually done a whole theory video on this, and you can check that out. I highly recommend you do. It's a theory that I'm very proud of, but I believe that Volo is actually not from the time of Hisui. He's from the future and came back to the time of Hisui. I think there's some really compelling evidence for this, so again, check out that video. But the gist of it is that there's this one line of dialogue he gives where he says, like, he will search for centuries if he needs to. Well, I don't know how much you know about humans, but humans don't typically live for centuries, plural. So the implication to me is that Volo can time travel. That's where he got all this knowledge and stuff. And again, there's more evidence, so do check out that video. But I did want to throw out there that I think Volo is also a faller. Clearly one that did not experience memory loss, though. But you could kind of say that maybe this is why Volo's a little cuckoo, you know? Maybe that's why he's a little crazy, is because he's fallen through one too many time rifts. He's time traveled one too many times. You know, I think about MCU references are really, really good on this channel. I think about how a warning that Hank Pym gave Scott Lang for shrinking down was that when you keep doing it, eventually it can kind of wear on your body and your mind, and that's why Hank Pym has hung up the Ant-Man suit. I imagine that ripping your body through space-time could do that to you, so maybe it makes Volo a little bit crazier. I think there's even like some theories or maybe even implications that that's what's happened to King the Conqueror in the Marvel Comics, at least. I'm not a huge comic book nerd. I like this stuff, but I'm not super knowledgeable in it, so don't quote me on that. But it seems feasible to me, at least. Anyways, some other interesting stuff about fallers that I think we need to talk about is, for one, that Arceus seems to actively cause this, right? We don't know what Annabelle's story was, what Looker's or Volo's stories were, if they indeed fell. But we do know the character from Diamond and Pearl. We know their story. Arceus purposefully sent them back in time to the days of Hisui, presumably to stop Volo and his plans to kind of get a hold of Arceus. Which is kind of interesting that Arceus sent you back in time to do something, because, again, if he sent you back in time, I would think the only reason he would need to send someone back in time is to stop someone else who's traveling through time. But, again, just check out that video. That's just, I have to throw this out. I love Volo, can you tell? But it's interesting to me that Arceus can select people to throw it back in time. I guess it's not so surprising that he does this, or can do this rather, since he's God, but I guess it's crazy to me that he does this. You know, that's very interesting that Arceus selects people to go back in time, and it makes you wonder, was Annabelle selected? Was Looker selected? Was Ingo selected? Were these divine plans by Arceus? And then on the note of Ingo and Annabelle being examples of people who have been thrown through a different time and through different time-space, it's interesting that's Battleheads being targeted, right? You know, Annabelle is the Salon Maiden, the battle brain of the Battle Tower, and then Ingo is one of the masters of the Battle Subway. So it's just interesting to me. All I'm saying is, if Legends ZA, one of the Battle Mason, whatever you pronounce that word as, I don't speak French, if one of those girls is thrown back in time to the days of Legends ZA, or thrown forward in time to ZA, whatever. If one of those girls is a faller, that's pretty suspicious. Or any battle facility character, for that matter. That's really interesting to me. A last little question I have, and probably the biggest question I have about the way these fallers work, is, does it mean that there are two in the timeline now? Like, for example, we know that Annabelle came from another timeline than the Sun and Moon one. So she fell into the Sun and Moon timeline, or Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, don't really care. She fell into those games. So Annabelle is now here in this timeline. Well, is there another Annabelle running the Battle Tower in the Hoenn region in the Sun, Ultra Moon timeline? Maybe that's not the case, as we do know that in Oris they are only starting to begin the Battle Frontier project, so things seem to be pushed along later in the timeline than from the originals. And maybe even that's kind of what we saw here, is a mix between those games. The reason the Battle Frontier project had not started in Oris is because they were still having trouble finding the head of the Battle Tower. We see them finding other characters, like there's an agent who mentions that he's found a girl named Lucy to become the Battle Pike Queen. So that's interesting to me, that maybe they haven't begun the project because they still can't find their battle tower head, which is like the main attraction, right? The biggest attraction in the battle frontier. And it's because the person who was supposed to become that brain fell into another timeline. I don't think this is the case, as Annabelle's depicted as much younger in the Pokemon Emerald battle frontier, but is depicted as much older when you look at the her character design in Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. In fact, I've always found it really funny that the anime states that Annabelle has a crush on Ash, who, you know, is 10, but then in the games, her and Looker have a thing for each other. So that's just kind of funny. I always thought that was interesting because, you know, I don't think you usually think, oh, the girl we all ship with Ash, not that we all do, but, you know, a lot of people ship with Ash, ends up with Looker. That sounds really bad. But that is just interesting to me. If there's two Annabelles in the timeline now, maybe she fell to a timeline where there was no Annabelle. You could also say we could be looking at like a Days of Future Past type thing. Not an MCU reference. Technically, that's Fox Marvel. I don't care if Deadpool and Wolverine technically make it part of the MCM, the Marvel Cinematic Multiverse. The point is that in Days of Future Past, when Wolverine goes back in time, instead of just his body going back in time, they kind of send his mind back in time, and he's in the past Wolverine's body. So he like basically possesses his past self. So maybe that's what happens too, is that Annabelle kind of possesses the Annabelle of the Sun Moon, Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon timeline. Now, obviously, you don't have to worry about this with the Diamond and Pearl characters or the Ingo character that fell, because they're existing hundreds of years before their characters will ever exist in the timeline, so you don't really have to worry about them coinciding. But the Annabelle one really is interesting to me. Like, that's really interesting to me. But yeah, be sure to let me know what you think of Fallers in general, what you think about all these questions about Fallers. This concept, while it was so big and while it is one of my favorite things, it's not as explored as I would like it to be, and I hope they explore it more in Legends ZA, since we did kind of get a little more stuff for it in Legends Arceus. And again, one day, Legends Alola, it's going to go hard. We're going to learn so much about Fallers. Mark my words. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss all of our future videos. And until next time, I will see all of you later.